right, welcome to all of our listeners. Today we're talking about an estate plan and why it goes beyond just having a will and why it even matters, right? Like, when is it appropriate to create an estate plan? So joining me today for the conversation is Jeremiah Lee. He's a California licensed attorney, certified financial planner. We get to do this work together. I also think he's one of the most handsome people because I'm married to him. I'm also a certified financial planner and an MBA, and we're excited to have this conversation today because we have so many clients that maybe have started an estate plan, but
Yeah, they're not sure. Well, I feel like when people come in, there's this general sentiment: if I'm young or if I don't feel wealthy, then it's probably not for me. I don't think I need
right.
those. And often I
Why?
hear people say will or trust, and they mean estate plan, but they don't know that they mean that. And so we sit down, we talk through like what goes into an estate plan. And I mean, something as simple as an advanced healthcare directive, which is a big word, but basically means if you're in the hospital, who's going to make a choice for you? If you go into a hospital with none of that filled out, the hospitals often will look to next of kin, which may or may not be the person that you want is at any age making a medical choice for you. Someone who's married, they would generally look to a spouse, but not always. And you may or may not want that. So even just
Right.
backing up for the whole estate planning concept, but like the advanced healthcare directive is one piece of estate plan, but everyone should have that. 18 and
Right.
up, everyone should have an advanced healthcare directive that says, if I can't make a medical choice, here is the person or the people I want to empower to make those choices for me.
Right. And we've been subject to the same pitfall, to be honest. We're business owners. We have a young family. We're busy. So to think about finalizing your estate plan, let's just be honest, it doesn't rise to the top of your priority list, as do groceries and kids' activities and whatever else you have going on. And it's in our appointments that we get the opportunity to bring it into focus and to say, yeah, this isn't urgent, but this is why it's important, even for those who are younger than they think they need to have an estate plan. And oftentimes people will kind of pass it off. I don't have a lot of money. Why is this necessary? They maybe are not aware that in California, probate is the default process that you would be subject to. And if you don't have an estate plan built out, do you want to talk a little bit about probate and why we might want to avoid it?
Yeah, I tell a lot of people, and I'm sure there's folks who work at the DMV who don't appreciate this very much, but I've often said that if you like the DMV, you're going to love probate. Like there's a lot of rules, there's long lines, it's public, it can be expensive, and that's kind of what you're subjecting your family or your spouse to if you were to pass away with no estate planning. That's the default, and California has rules to get through that. So the things that are going to trigger probate, send you to probate, is if you have any sort of real estate. Those types of things here in California, that's going to send you to probate. If you have, I think it's around $180,000 right now of just assets, checking accounts, savings accounts, CDs, that's going to trigger probate. And as soon as you trigger probate, basically what the court does, it tries to grab your entire estate, everything you have, pull it in, and then have a court monitored process to determine who can administer your estate and who can push those things out.
Kind of fairly distribute your assets based on the information that they have. But they don't know you personally. They don't know your interests. Right. They don't know that you have a heart for a specific charity or that you have a long lost nephew that could really use these assets. They don't know you. It's a public process as well. So it's all recorded so that everybody could see what happens in the midst of the probate process. It's, like he said, court administered. So
yeah. And the hard part is often we'll find if we have, say we'll have a client and their parents don't have any estate planning. They pass away, the house goes into probate. And as they're dealing with the probate court, it might be a year, 6 months, a year and a half before that house is able to be sold, just because the probate takes a while. And so in the meantime, there might be a mortgage to be paid. There might be a gardener to be paid. There might be family members who could really use kind of that distribution. All that kind of just gets put on pause. And whoever the beneficiaries are, often they're coming out of pocket to help fund the probate, take care of the house, in the hopes that when probate winds up, they're going to get those assets.
Right. So not only is it lengthy, it can be expensive too. And I mean, oftentimes this becomes a topic of conversation with our clients when they are walking through the death of a loved one. And they often say, man, I don't want to have to do this. for the people that I leave behind. Like, I want a more clear-cut process. I do have to take a pause, though, and just speak up for any DMV worker that might be listening to this
That's
podcast,
right.
because I will say, although COVID was a terrible experience for most everyone, the impact of COVID on my DMV experience the last time I went in, their process is way more efficient now. So we might have to come up with a new
That's
illustration.
right. Yeah, last time I was there, they were great as well. So way to go, the DMV folks who are rebuilding those
Right.
processes. But
Just want to make
well,
sure that's clear. But,
that's
you know.
great. That's great. When I think in California too, California is different than other states. And just so everyone knows, estate planning is state by state. They have different rules, different way that the laws have developed. And so in California, it's very common that all real estate, in my view, all real estate needs to go into a trust. Otherwise, it's going to have probate issues. You can have all sorts of things. There's a number of other states where they don't do it that way. And so this conversation is probably California specific. If you're in a different state, it just means you're going to check with the local attorney to find out what's common, what's best practice in your state based on your laws.
Right.
But when I say estate planning, here's what I really mean. Everyone's still going to have a will. That's part of it. The main piece is probably going to be your trust. That's the driving document. Then there's a durable power of attorney, means during your life, who can make choices for you if you can't. And then an advanced healthcare directive. Those are the key ones. The next piece is funding your trust. So a deed or kind of updating titles to get things into your trust. And then there's a number of ancillary documents depending on your needs. And so some people, there's assignments, they get things into your trust. There's a number of other side pieces that might be included or might not, but those are kind of the main things that we talk about. And we talked about the healthcare directive just a little bit. Just to kind of put this out there, even as a snippet, we've had a lot of folks who don't realize, but when your child or your niece or when they turn 18, the parents no longer have the same medical rights that they did previously. And so as you're sending your kid off to college, you're excited, great. They fall down, they break their leg or something, they're in a hospital. The parents can't just walk in with the same rights they had when they were 17 because now they're an adult. And so I think a key piece of this is when people turn 18, any age, or at that age, turn 18, any asset level, getting a durable power of attorney and an advanced healthcare directive, so valuable. It allows that
should be
18-year-old.
standard, but it's very rare that people are actually aware of that.
Yeah.
And because they're young and they're healthy and they're probably not expecting some sort of situation where the 18-year-old wouldn't be able to make medical decisions on their own. But that's a great point that you bring up. And kind of similar to that, for the person who's listening saying, I'm way too young for an estate plan, right? That's somebody who is much older than me. I know one of the critical elements and conversations that we had to have when we were building our estate plan is, if something were to happen to both of us, who has guardianship over our kids? And furthermore, how would our assets be distributed in order to take care of our kids? And so if you have a young family, although it's a topic that isn't fun, it is necessary. And, I go back to the comment, I use this phrase a lot lately: clear is kind. And clear, sometimes to get there, is difficult. It might be a hard conversation to think about the reality of that moment if both parents were to pass away. But wouldn't you want there to be clear instructions for your desire of how your kids would be cared for, right? So that to me is imperative enough to make creating a full estate plan a priority.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. It's a hard conversation, and I try not to get callous because I have these conversations on a regular basis. But to walk through this, for some people, it's just a matter of planning. For most people, there's an emotional string there, and to say, what would it be like if we weren't around? What would it be like if this person wasn't here? But even in the midst of that difficulty, to walk through that to get an estate plan in place, often I tell folks it's just a safety net. It's not like this is one plan that will exist for the rest of your life. It's just a safety net for now. Every 3 to 5 years, you should be pulling off the shelf, taking a look at it. Does this still make sense? And if it does, cool, just put it back on the shelf. But if it doesn't, let's have some updates. Let's make some revisions. So why don't we jump into some stories of the things that we've seen that, oh man, this just didn't make sense, kind of the mistakes people have made, or just the gotcha moments. I have one personally for you and I. We, being me an attorney, I made our estate plan, got it out there. We got it signed, put our house in it. So great. Well, then we moved. And part of the loan transaction is they had to close the loan in our individual names. It's a very common way that loans and escrows require that. So we bought a new house, we moved houses, put the loan and the house in our names. And then as the attorney, the little flag went up, oh, I need to move this house into our trust after escrow closes. We'll do that. Well, life and kids and busy, I can write the deed myself. It wasn't like I had to go find somebody. And it was probably over a year, maybe a year and a half
Yep.
before you and I actually sat down and I wrote a deed. We signed the deed. We moved the house into our trust. And it was
Yep.
slightly embarrassing to even say, I knew that was such an important step. It just didn't happen. So for clients, we see this all the time, that they have a trust, they got it done, it looks great, but when we talk about what's in it, did you put the
Right.
house in it? Did you put that large CD or that savings account? What about your investment account? Is that in the trust? And they say, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. And what would be really unfortunate in some of these situations, we haven't had anyone pass away, but we've seen, had they passed away, where the trust would have actually just been empty. It would have been an empty shell. Think
Yep.
like a treasure box. Open the treasure box. There's just nothing in it. And so then
Right.
all the other assets are outside of that treasure box. They all have to go through probate. And so even though you have a trust, funding it and then keeping that updated, if you move, get the new house in there. If you have an investment account, get that in the trust. So
Yep.
that's the first story that I would say is it was our story. We forgot to get our new house in our trust.
Yeah, no, I love that. We recently met with a client who, had a series of unfortunate events, and she was the one appointed to be responsible to oversee the estate plans for these family members. I think it was like an uncle and the uncle's child, and it's like 2 or 3 different people over the span of about 5 years. And she had to walk through that probate process in some circumstances. And even now, I think she's still waiting for the court
Mm,
date to be able to go and find and be appointed as the person responsible to distribute the assets after a family member's death. And so her walking through this process of not just one, but unfortunately multiple within a short period of time, all of a sudden you have family members who you may or may not be that close with. All eyes are on you. Because regardless of what your financial situation is, if they are dependent upon or expecting some portion of that estate, you're going to feel the pressure to try to get all those things finalized as fast as possible. And going back to what you're talking about, probate is not a fast process, right? You are subject to court scheduling, et cetera. All the paperwork, another attorney that you're going to have to hire. It's expensive.
right.
And so it was as a result of that, when we sat down and met with her, she's like, it's time. I need to put my plan in place because I don't want to curse this on someone else.
Right.
In other circumstances, we do have clients whose adult children are special needs and they're not sure. In fact, I'm thinking of one couple specifically who, they're unsure of the competency of their child to be able to live independently when they are no longer around,
Mhm.
because they don't know the trajectory of their son's development. And so, you have to kind of think of all the scenarios, best case and worst case. What would be the needs for this child? Because that's not their only child. So how do you structure a trust in such a way that makes sure it has the benefit provided for this child, regardless of their development trajectory? And if there's any residual, also for the benefit of the other kids, right? So there's complexity. There's like
Yeah.
conversations that need to be had. And I love the point that you made. It doesn't have to be set in stone forever. You make a decision at one point, you write the trust document or the will, right? You create the estate plan in support of that. But it doesn't mean that amendments can't be made, that changes can't be made going forward. But at least you have something in place.
Yep,
So,
that's so good. And I think even that I like your comment about timing. And this is just, I guess, for everyone. Like as a story, I had a friend of an existing client who called and said, "I'm going in for major surgery tomorrow. Is there any way to put a will or a trust or something in place?" He was a surgeon himself, going into surgery, but he had kids and grandkids, and there was things he wanted to send money here but not there. He had thoughts and things. But I kind of told him, I was like, there's no way to get this done, within the next
and a
8 hours, right, in
like,
order to have it set up by tomorrow. And basically, the conversation was, I gave him some options that he could do, but saying when everyone thinks about a will or a trust or getting this taken care of, often there's a triggering event. Their parents passed away, they had a health scare, something. But I would encourage anybody, when you're healthy and have the capacity, just get version 1 done, get it in place,
mm-hmm.
even though you might do updates later. Get that version in place when you're healthy and able to think through it versus trying to do it in an emergency. It's not a long process to get a will or a trust in place, but it does take a little bit of time. It takes
Yeah.
some thoughts, it takes some understanding, explaining what your estate planning options might be, and then getting something written, getting it signed, getting it funded. Like it takes a little bit. So you just as that comment, I've had a number of people that come in a panic, and that one specifically was the next day surgery, and just said, I'd like to have something in place before then. And it's a really hard moment because I agree, you should absolutely have something in place before you go to surgery,
Right. And
but
if you're
there's no
making
way
an
to get it done.
urgent, right, you're making an urgent decision, it might not be the best decision. I mean, I think of your family member, your aunt, who just was
Mm-hmm.
kind of unsure of the documents. And I think you had written was it a healthcare directive
Mm-hmm.
or a POA? And she unfortunately was unconscious for a certain amount of time. So she had these documents literally you had delivered to her just a few days prior. Good thing she recovered from that initial bout and then was able to finalize those
Sign them,
documents.
yeah.
Like then she realized like the relevancy of making sure that those were in place to protect her while she wasn't able to speak for herself. So, unfortunately, it's not urgent until it is.
Yep.
And then it's extremely urgent. So it's just one of those things that we want to make sure we get in front of our clients that they're prepared for. And from our office perspective, when we have a client pass away, we're called right away because the family members want to know, what do I do? What do, there might be medical bills, funeral expenses, burial expenses. Like, what do I do? So one of the benefits we offer is just being able to house that information in one place. We have copies of our client's estate plan, and so we can be a resource to them. And just how beneficial that is in the moment to say, don't worry, right? You can put this aside as a priority because you have other matters to deal with when you're grieving or dealing with other
Yeah.
family members. So,
Yeah. And some of this stuff is just functional, getting it done. Part of the reason that our office is structured the way it is, we have, Tricord Legal Services and Tricord Advisors, two companies right next to each other. One's a law firm, one's a financial advising firm. But we able to integrate those services because a lot of times people will talk about an estate plan on the financial advisor side. We talk about how they need that. They agree. They say that's a great idea. How do I get that done? And in years prior, we give them a referral, say, here's a few names. This would be some great options for you. They say, great. We see them at the next meeting. Did you get that estate planning done? Oh, we called them, but we didn't quite get it. And it just lingers. We've had a few that it's lingered for years and years. They
yeah,
want to do it, they just don't know how. And part of the dynamic we have is with having the legal services. We can just say, you want to get it done? Let's get it done. At our next meeting, we'll have documents and we'll move forward. And
right.
I think it's a really good resource of just kind of the administrative of just getting that accomplished.
Right. So let's just go ahead and list out. We've talked about it, but the core components of a comprehensive estate plan are a durable power of attorney. And I'm going to pause in a minute and let you kind of explain what that role is and what powers they have. You want a medical power of attorney or a healthcare proxy. They can make decisions regarding your care, your health care, if you're unable to do so for yourself. A living will, or an inter vivos will, is also what it's called, or a revocable will. Revocable living trust. I'm sorry, I said that was revocable. It should just be a living will, a revocable trust, beneficiary designations, and that the titles are consistent across your multiple properties and holdings. So,
yeah, those are great. We'll jump in. So the durable power of attorney, people hear that word durable and think that means after death. It doesn't. It just means if someone's unconscious, that power of attorney continues. So it's durable in a capacity sense. And often these are
but
signed
during life.
but during life, only during life. So these are often signed when someone, is approaching things like dementia in the long term, or they just have in place in the event there's a car accident or something. And someone needs to pay a mortgage, get into a bank account, do anything kind of financially for someone who's still alive. It's a great catch-all. We even have people who are leaving the country and they empower someone through a power of attorney to close a transaction while they're out of the country.
Great example of this, though, it was a client of ours that was unconscious and they had fraud on their savings account. They couldn't even deal or replace the money in their savings account because they were unconscious. If they didn't have a durable power of attorney, that family member didn't have the authority to speak on their behalf to resolve the issue.
That's a great example. So the person who was authorized was able to call the bank, provide the power of attorney, and then get access to deal with the fraud, stop the account, stop the fraud on that individual's account while they're in the hospital.
Get reimbursement.
That's a great example. Yeah. So next one we talked about a little bit is the healthcare directive. This is to indicate who you would like to make healthcare choices for you. If for some reason you can't, there's also places in there to provide direction. Often we don't include things like burial options, but people will say, hey, I don't ever want to have a feeding tube, or I'm willing to donate my organs if that's an option. But really, you're designating a person who's going to make those types of choices for you in the event that you can't. The next, you talked about a will. In California, often we use what's called a pour-over will, meaning, if you didn't get something into your trust during your life, your will, the job of it really is to gather those last assets and pour them over into your trust. And part of what that does is that makes the trust the main document to deal with your stuff. But the other job of the will is to deal with, like you said, guardians. Like that's where in California, you would appoint a guardian to care for your kids, of who you would want to be the people to oversee their being raised for the rest of their lives. That kind of brings us to the trust, which for most people, that's kind of the main piece of their estate plan. The reason we use the trust is a will becomes public, like you said, when you file it with the court. A trust remains private. And so with that, giving gifts to people, deciding which child gets what, who's in charge of doing these things, all that can be confidentially dealt with in a trust, which is a private document. There's a very famous Jackie Kennedy Onassis, had a will. And in her will had to become public when she passed away. There wasn't anything overly scandalous, but there's a few gifts that are noted that people took note of at the time. One specifically is she didn't include anything for her sister. Included her sister's kids, but not her sister. And the famous language in there is that she said, "I've provided separately for my sister during her life." Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but it became a little bit of a scandal, and it became public. If that same information had been put inside the trust, no one would have known about it. It would have been a private matter between the attorneys and the individual parties. But because it was in the will, it became public. So the trust is private. It dictates what you want. And the beauty of a trust is it doesn't just say who gets your stuff when you die. It also can dictate how they get it. So, for example, if your kids are younger, when they turn 18, often giving an 18-year-old half of an estate or all of your money or something like that is not the best for the 18-year-old. And so a trust allows you to put in some limitations to say, whoever your trustee is, care for them, pay for college, help them, get going in life, but don't really give them all the money until maybe they're 30 or 35.
Right. A lot of conditional statements. If they, or upon when they have graduated from college, then they will be able to receive X amount of the inheritance, or when they turn 30, or when they, right? Like that's where we can get really specific about those directions. It's kind of the map and how to get from point A to point B.
That's right. And all of that goes into the trust. And there's also even like asset protection items. If I were to put my house in a trust, it doesn't really change the dynamic of if I were to injure someone, if they could go after my house. Whereas if parents put assets in a trust for a child and the child gets in a car accident, those assets still have some layers of protection of getting to them. So there's even asset protection structures of giving things to your kids, but keeping them still in trust for many years for those purposes. And that's where we start to get complex, and we won't spend a lot of time on this conversation, but depending on someone's situation, there's so much opportunity in the trust to do. But I think the impetus of this conversation is but you need to have a trust. You need to take those first steps to get going.
Right. And I think the point that I do want to make, though, is that the trust document provides the authority, or appoints the authority to make decisions on behalf of the trust. And so often we talked about this in another episode about Mythbusters. My family all gets along, we never have conflict, all our kids are friends, right? Why would we have to appoint one person or three people or note who is in control of our assets after death? Well, you never know what circumstances are going to happen, what that impact is when death and money are involved, right? It can bring out the worst in people. So again, clear is kind, and developing a document. And then we oftentimes have clients that want us to help initiate or invite family members during their life into a greater conversation about, hey, we want to expose to you the elements of our estate plan so that ahead of time. We've appointed your sister as successor trustee, and then this other sibling is in charge of this portion of the trust, etc. So the information is shared. Now, every family is unique. Every family is different. There is no formula to this. And so we have clients who don't want to share the details of their estate plan with their client, right? That is up to you. So I like that you made the point that the trust document can stay confidential, the details of it, or it can be shared during your lifetime with those who it matters to. So
to spur that conversation, have everyone shared expectations beforehand. That's great.
Well, hopefully some of the items that we shared today were helpful. Why an estate plan is helpful, even if you're young. even if you're busy, even if you don't think you have a lot of money, right? Having a comprehensive estate plan is a critical part of maintaining a holistic financial plan. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at Tricord Advisors. Thank you so much for listening. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.